What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
When it's Bro Meets World.
Your boy Meets World Funcast. I am Ceej.
I'm Tony Curtis. How are you, sir?
Yeah, we're back for another episode. It's so funny. I was, of course, I'm like doing all of this like work on our pod, and I went back and I listened to the pilot episode, and you go and you do that. And I was like, every episode, you were like, every episode. And I was like, oh, we've literally been doing it every episode.
That little when is Bro Meets World? That little intro thing you do?
Yeah.
Wow,
absolutely.
It's stuck around since the pilot. Look at
It's
that.
since the pilot. It's crazy. I was like, oh, we've been doing this. I think we're in really good spirits. Some things that we will be talking about in a later episode. But just know that I think that we're in a good place.
I'm feeling great.
Okay.
What Ceej is referring to is
we'll
the fact
talk
that...
about later. We will talk
okay,
about
we'll
later. Okay.
Yeah, I'm feeling good. It's been a great week, and I'm really excited to jump into this ridiculous episode with you.
Absolutely. Really quickly, I want to tell you, have you seen this episode has like a B storyline with Matthew Lawrence?
It has a B storyline or a B storyline?
A non-B storyline, if that makes sense.
No.
You know what? None of it does. But did you see the clip I sent you on Matthew Lawrence from his podcast, Brotherly Love?
Oh, 100%. For those who don't know what we're talking about, Matthew Lawrence said on his podcast that he had basically a Me Too type of incident where he got sent by his agency to a director's hotel room. He was basically approached saying, hey, if you want to make it in this business, kid, that whole thing, and walked out and got dropped by his agency, and like a really sad story. And I like when you showed it, you sent it to me, I was like, wow. Like, and the thing I kept thinking about was just like, Matthew Lawrence is not like nobody. Like, his brother's famous, like he's part of like kind of like a legacy family in a way, and that even happened to him. Like, it really doesn't matter, you know what I mean?
Does not matter. Doesn't matter at all. And I like, first of all, again, just applause for him for even being vulnerable enough to share that information with everyone. But like, I was like, wow. And again, like, while we're in the Renaissance of Brendan Fraser, it's like this idea. That's where he went away for a little bit. It was just because he also had like a very similar incident. And I'm really happy that more and more people are coming forward. But it's just, it's sad to hear how many people have had this.
Well, yeah. And, you know, one of the things he talks about on his podcast, which I highly recommend everybody listen to, Brotherly Love, the one he does with Joey and Andy. He talks about how, you know, there's kind of this double standard where it feels like people are more ready to have the conversation about Me Too incidences happening to women than they are to men. And even when someone like Terry Crews comes out and says this happened to me, that because he represents masculinity, it just creates a discomfort that people aren't ready to engage in. And I just thought that was a really interesting approach. And, you know, in general, whether it be man or a woman, I wonder how many brilliant actors never made it because they were brave enough to just stand up for themselves.
Absolutely. That such a good, so well said. Okay, in a very sharp shift of conversations, we have a few morning announcements. First of all, before we dive into the episode, I want to make sure to give a shout out to all of our listeners who have been sending us emails and recordings, commenting on our YouTube and Instagram and all over the place. You guys have been like fantastic, especially lately. And we have a feeling that we'll be hearing a lot more from you in the future. But that's great because we love hearing from you. And we want you to share your thoughts with us and make sure you send us emails and questions at bromeetsworld@gmail.com. Record a voice message and send it to us on our website.
Absolutely.
Later on in this episode, we actually have an interview from one of our listeners who is a social worker about the previous episode, Can I Help to Cheer You? About the Tommy and Eric storyline.
Which I think actually kind of plays a role in this storyline as well in an interesting way that we'll get into.
Oh, I'm ready to talk about this episode, but I definitely want our listeners to kind of stick around for that interview because I think it's going to be great. Like,
absolutely,
how fantastic is this? So yeah, you guys stick around. We have a interview. She's a social worker, cosplay enthusiast, and a Boy Meets World fan. So make sure that you listen to that. And then finally, we have a special request for all of our listeners. We're on a mission to reach 1,000 YouTube subscribers. Help us out by
Ayo.
subscribing to our channel and sharing with your friends.
That's right. You know,
episode.
I've encountered a few Bromance World fans out in the wild recently, and some of and a few of them were interested. They were like, "I recognize your voice and not your face." Guys, we have video episodes all on YouTube and especially on Spotify. You guys can catch video episodes of all of our recordings. So yeah, go ahead and subscribe, and you guys can watch us engage in these ridiculous conversations.
Yeah, get to know our faces. We have good faces. Good faces.
Yeah, we serve face. We serve.
Hey, let's get into this episode. Are you ready?
I'm buzzing with excitement.
You know what? I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Go ahead and give me the telephone.
Oh my gosh. Tell us about it. The Dean's ex returns. So the boys vandalize everything that he owns so that Feeny can be the only one that she bones.
Yes. Feeny getting the
That's
booty.
Right. Vandalism equals booty, guys.
This is the season 6, episode 19, Be True. The series returns to its form as Cory and Shawn unite for the last time as a bad boy team to help Mr. Feeny, whose hesitation in declaring his feelings for Dean Bolander looks like a fatal mistake when her ex, Curtis, returns from an expedition bent on winning her back. Shawn and Cory trash Curtis's lab and blame it on a jealous rage by Feeny, who then saves Dean Bolander's life for real and wins her heart by swatting away a rare bee that Curtis brought back just before his thing started. She explains that she was not taken in for a moment by the boys' ruse, just impressed that Feeny's students care so much about him. In a B storyline, Rachel challenges Jack to take her out on a real date. The only problem is Jack is embarrassed that Rachel is so much taller than he
is. Yep. That's this episode.
That's it. Okay, so go ahead and give me your first impressions. We're going to start with the A story.
I just want to ask you a quick question. In that description, it said Cory and Shawn team up for one last.
That's what it says.
That is not correct. This is not the last time.
Again, we know that I get mine from Wikipedia, which I will say, the longer we go, the more that has been a mistake. Because this, we got like a paragraph on the intro, and it was so convoluted, which much like this episode. But I was like, is this necessary? Can we you know what? I'm gonna have Chat GPT give me a new one, a better one, a shorter one. That's me. That's my future.
You know, okay. In terms of just starting about this episode, our first thoughts.
Yeah.
I went into this thinking this was going to be the worst episode of Boy Meets World I ever saw. I went into this thinking that, I don't know, I remember just really hating this episode pretty passionately as a kid. And I think part of that was just this idea that it was an adult storyline, and I was probably caught up more with just the adventures of the kids. However, rewatching it, it's still pretty terrible, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. So I'll just leave it at that. There was things about it that I was able to enjoy, things about Eric's character that I was able to read through, things about Jack and Rachel's storyline that I thought were interesting nuggets.
Yes.
So there's a few bits in this episode that I think are worth noting, but overall I think it's hot garbage. What about you?
That was such a setup to ultimately just call it garbage. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was funny. I had fun. Ooh. I thought it's stupid funny, but it's funny. There are moments where I'm like, you're more stupid than you are funny, but there are also moments where I was like, this is more funny than it is stupid, and that's how I feel about it. Also, I will say right off the bat, in our A storyline, which I'm calling Feeny and the Dean,
that can't be the A storyline. It has to be the B storyline.
That is the A storyline. The B storyline is the non-B storyline.
Wow, this is trying to keep up, guys.
But yeah, no, I just thought it was nice for Feeny to have a storyline.
Absolutely.
I thought it was great, but I was like, this entire episode, everything about it felt rushed. I don't know what was going on in the writer's room. I don't know if this was like, it just felt like it could have taken another pass, or
Can
like
I
they ran out of time. Go.
can I speculate out loud with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, they needed to jumpstart this relationship between Feeney and the Dean, because we are
I mean,
maybe
like,
three out. Yeah, we're like 3 episodes away from the finale. We're getting to the sweeps week. We don't have like a wedding or anything building up to anything. Like, there's nothing building.
What do you mean we don't have a wedding building up to anything?
Well,
We
I mean, Cory and
absolutely
Topanga's
have a wedding.
but they're not doing it. They're not doing it for the finale. Like, it's not even something that's being discussed. Like, hey, we have this date that's coming up. It just feels like it's further in the future. It just doesn't feel like there's anything like building up to a momentous season finale. And it felt like this was like a, hey guys, we have to course correct and like push this Feeney and the Dean relationship so that, like, if hypothetically Feeney were to propose to the Dean by the end of the season, it's not awkward.
Okay, so first of all, your spoiler alert, I will be charging you
It was
for
a hypothetical. It was a
No.
hypothetical.
Strictly speaking, no, I will not accept it. Number one. Number two is that is so ludicrous, because here's the thing. You just said something, we have a wedding coming. They are engaged. Cory and Topanga are engaged, and they absolutely should be working. Now, I will say this feels misplaced. I feel like you could take this episode as is and move it, with the exception of Eric's whole Rachel scream. You can move it for closer in the season, and it would make so much sense. You could actually move it directly after.
You could just remove it from the season, and it would help everything make sense.
Absolutely. But I'm saying, if you needed to keep it, you could move it directly after the Stewart episode. And again, it would make more sense.
You know what? I'm so glad you brought that up, because I did think it was very interesting that in this episode, Cory, when he's first approached by Eric, which we're going to get into all of this, I just I just thought it was interesting that Cory brought up the fact that, hey, I'm on probation for punching a teacher. Like, that's continuality in a world where continuality is non-existent. So I give it flowers when it happens.
All right. So I just want to talk. All right, we'll just kind of go through it a little bit, like the story arc. First things first, I will say, Angela
looks
her
so
little bit
good.
She looks so good. I was like,
she was so hot in this episode.
Loving the outfit, giving it to me. And then when her and Topanga are talking to the Dean, and the Dean is like, I've been showing some leg. And Angela's like, okay. Like,
she was like, damn.
I love when intergenerational people have like a fun little back and forth. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I wonder how fun this was for the cast themselves, knowing that the Dean and Feeney are married in real life, and just kind of teasing and having that kind of fun where they get to be a little bit more playful. And, you know, one of the things that they've been saying on their podcast and you know, throughout all their interviews is that when Bonnie, who plays the Dean, when she came onto the cast, they said that it really brought Phil Daniels out of his shell more, and that he was more playful, and that he had a little bit more life to him. And you see that a lot reflected in this episode. So I just wanted to give her props for being able to bring something new out of Feeney.
A little bit of roll call. We have Bonnie Bartlett, who is Will Daniels' real wife, playing Dean Bolander, Frances X. McCarthy as Curtis Kincaid, Sandra Gould as Little Old Lady, Lillian Adams as Mrs. Furlong, and Mildred Dumas as Mrs. Bertelson. I don't know. They say it.
Did you recognize Curtis?
I didn't recognize Curtis. Who's Curtis?
The one who plays the ex,
Frances McCarthy. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, he had a face that looked really familiar, and I was like, I know this dude from something. And I'm looking at his IMDb right now, and he was just in like guest appearances on like 1,000 different television shows. I thought maybe he had like he just had one of those faces that looked familiar to me.
I honestly, it felt like insert old white guy. And like, no offense to Francis, but they had the girls like Topanga and Angela lusting over Curtis, and I was like, if you don't have me lusting, I'm gonna need like a sexier older man. I'm gonna need like
yeah, he wasn't giving off those zaddy vibes at all.
Exactly. So give me like say Dick Van Dyke. Give me someone who, like, you know,
Dick Van Dyke. I'm learning more about you.
I'm saying during his whole what was it called? Diagnosis Murder. He was out
Man,
there. He was popping.
I mean, maybe.
Okay, going back to it. Just want to say, Will also hilarious this episode.
He's
Hilarious.
great. Yeah, and one of the things, like I said, that I thought tied back to last episode, which wasn't really kind of super in your face, was this idea that like we start the episode with Eric. I'm doing it again. Eric just being like super hyper fixated on Feeney and his relationship with the dean, and it's like, oh, this dude just lost Tommy. He is like, who can I connect with? Who in my life can I consistently go to? And even though there's this generational divide between him and Feeney, in this episode specifically, you almost see him pushing past some of the boundaries that were present in their relationship before. He's, interrupting him in the middle of his class. He's talking about slapping cheeks with the dean. He's like, he's playing with him and being familiar with him in ways that we haven't really seen. That kind of shows me that he's trying to have a more intimate connection with this person who's in his life that he's not able to get from anywhere else.
Yeah, it's erratic behavior. And like you said, the moment it starts, I'm like, how much of this is Eric needing someone to have a happy ending and being like, too many people aren't taking initiatives. Like he sees Feeney not going after what he wants, and he's like, I've done that, and I know what that feeling looks like, and I don't want someone who I care about, aka Feeney, to go do the same thing. And so in a way, he really pushes him. Before
I feel like pushing Feeney only makes sense when the ex-husband arrives. Like, otherwise, I don't really see a reason why this is the conflict of this episode.
But that's because they don't really write to it. I feel like if we would have gotten a line in, like, before Feeney shows up to the table with Eric, just give Eric a line of being like, look, I need to get them together. Or like Feeney watching the dean and I said Feeney, but Eric watching the dean and Feeney have a conversation and kind of drop mixed signals and everything. Like the dean is raising her ankle a little bit, like like giving all the signals.
Or maybe Eric overhears the dean telling Topanga and Angela this stuff and is like, Feeney, you gotta step your game.
Which, by the way, that makes, not only does that make more sense, because the scene where the dean just walks in with Topanga and Angela, right?
In what world?
Like, again, I'm like, what are we doing? Why are you having this conversation literally like 5 feet from this person?
Yeah.
Now, had they had that conversation before and they walk past and Eric hears them and then goes to Feeney, now we at least have narrative sense.
Totally. And also just like, I understand why Eric wants to help Feeney. I have no idea why Angela and Topanga are having this conversation with the dean, what relationship they have with the dean. There could be a whole Feeney, Eric subplot happening with the dean and the girls that we wouldn't even know about. And it just feels like there's a connection there that we just aren't seeing on screen.
What else are 3 educated women supposed to talk about if not a man?
You're right. You're right.
Think about it. What else would they talk about at a college?
Well, speaking of talking about men, I want to talk about Curtis for a second, the ex, because when he comes in, first of all, I love how they're trying to play it off as like he's like this Indiana Jones, like cool guy, but he gave off major colonizer energy to me.
Oh,
when
absolutely.
He was like, oh, I'm not an archaeologist. I like to think of myself as an adventurer, a treasure hunter. Treasure hunter? Whose treasure you hunting, Curtis?
Oh, when we talk about the scene of the like in the indigenous stuff or like all the artifacts, I will get there. But yeah, no, absolutely.
You mean the items he took from Africa?
Well, not just Africa, several places. Shawn is lifting out all different regions, and again, we will get there. You and you're moving ahead. I'm pulling us back.
Well, to pull back to when he's first talking, that scene where like Angela and Topanga are like fawning over the idea of him. The stories that he's telling, do you know Harry Potter?
Yeah. Yes.
If I said Gilderoy Lockhart, do you understand what I'm saying?
100%. I do once you said it.
Gilderoy Lockhart energy of just like, oh yeah, I was in Africa and I was doing this and I was doing that. And I'm just looking at this dude and I'm like, were you though? Were you? It just all just felt so boasty. It all just felt so self-serving. And then for him to go on the sidelines and then start talking shit about Feeny afterwards, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, if you're this big dude, why are you insecure all of a sudden now that he's talking about books? Like, I didn't see any reason why Curtis, if he was this dude, felt intimidated by Feeny at all to mess with him or talk shit.
I completely agree with you. I was like, let's just take a note from Jurassic Park with Sir Alan Grant, who actually went to an island with some dinosaurs. He don't even go around and be talking like this. And he was with dinosaurs. So Curtis, what could you possibly be doing that makes you like just come in and be this boastful? And like just be telling stories with no slides, no visual evidence. These are just storytelling. And if anything, I want to check the credentials of this college because y'all just have a guest speaker coming in. Again, no visuals, no notes, no verification, just his stories.
What I thought was very strange was their decision to say, hey, I'm also her ex-husband and I'm here to win her back. And I'm just like, whoa. Having him be the ex-husband versus like an ex-boyfriend or even like an ex-fiance, it just complicates things so much more because now it's like, well, clearly that didn't work out for a reason. So what's the backstory there? And like, how does that play into what's happening? Maybe it was, he was this showboaty, talkful, like boastful person in the relationship. And part of the reason why she likes Feeny is because he has this like modesty, like work it in somehow.
Thank you. I was actually kind of thinking they would do that because when Feeny gets up and he's starting to teach his own class, and Curtis is like, books? Who reads books anymore? Who cares what a book says? I'm like, okay, or like adventurer, treasure hunter, or whatever. Yeah. I feel like you should be reading some books just if you're gonna be out there doing it. Number one. Number two is the dean kind of gives him this look where I thought that they were gonna at least mention that she likes the fact that George is an intellectual who cares about books, and that's what they have in common. But they didn't do it. So
nope.
I don't know. What are you gonna do?
Something
about
there is
Curtis.
Oh, go ahead.
Right. Something about Curtis and everyone in this episode. The hair is herring. Like because of the pod, I am now on hair watch, and the hair in this episode, magnifique. Everyone.
Ceej, if Michael Jacobs' name's on it, the hair is herring, okay?
The hair is gonna hair.
And you know that John Mulaney joke where he's like, middle schoolers make fun of you accurately, and they'll just point at him and be like, look at that high-waisted man, he has feminine hips. Like, I feel like Michael Jacobs has this thing about hair where it's just like such a deep insecurity for him that like it's the thing that he had, like, no, the hair needs to hair in order for this to happen, and it comes through every time.
A lot of good hair. I think he cast with hair first. Like they're like, we have someone in the role for you. He's like, let me see their hair.
I feel like that's just that was a relic of the 80s. Hair first casting. I mean, look at Swayze. Not to say anything bad about Swayze, but that hair alone could get you a gig.
Hair alone. Okay. You were gonna say.
Oh, I was just going to say that it's really interesting that there's almost this Hamilton and Burr thing happening between Feeny and Curtis, this like, oh, do I wait for it versus I'm not going to throw away my shot. And I love that Feeny is being challenged on this idea of like what old-fashioned romance is versus like, even though she's an older woman, she's a modern older day woman. And she's like, he needs to pick up the pace and he needs to like show me like something real. And I just thought that was a really interesting, fun conversation.
And again, according to like the cast, there's a little bit of that mirrored in their real life dynamic. You know, Will tries to be a little bit more reserved. Bonnie brings him out of a shell, and she's just a little bit like, yeah, like let's do this. We're young, we moving. So yeah, I wanted to get that.
What did you think about this Godfather bit they tried to insert? I felt like you probably enjoyed that a lot more than I did. I don't know.
I had so much fun with it. Here's the thing, again, because it was stupid. Like, so the Godfather scene is funny, stupid. And the brain in a jar scene is stupid. And I had fun with this one because I was like, I know what we're doing. The idea of Cory and Shawn being like, we're legits now. We don't like everyone just speaking.
We're
in
the
tone.
baking company now. Yeah. I have to say, I felt that Ben did the best with that bit. He like had this like kind of New Yorky kind of accent that he kind of unintentionally maybe stayed with the entire episode. I don't know. I kind of heard bits of it, but I just thought that he did the best in that little dynamic of the three.
That scene, I wrote it down when he goes, I come to you hat in hand. It's my hat. It's my hand.
My hand.
I was like, yes, I'm here for it. Loving it. On the day of our bake sale. You're right. Like that entire scene. And there's a moment where Shawn is even funny in that one. Oh, Shawn, I remembered it. Shawn goes, I like being out. I like not looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes. And he looks over and he looks at the guy who's walking by him. And he just gives him this look like watching you. And again, it was really fun acting.
Shawn playfully kind of throws out there that the trailer may have been hit by a train. Don't know if that's canon or not, but let's just see if there's any more mention of this trailer in the future.
Again, I don't know how to explain it other than this particular scene was stupid funny. And
you know what? I agree with you that like up until this point, it's stupid, but I'm still having like fun with the episode a little bit. It's not until they get into like Curtis's office where the episode just feels like it just takes a complete left turn.
Completely agree with you because like the brain in the jar it's just like we enter child sitcom stupid in the sense that it's like, oh, we're going to use ancient artifacts that are irreplaceable and just like try to bust things open because we don't have to respect other cultures because we're doing a bit, and as long as you're doing a bit, respecting culture is out of the window. And then
I just don't think it makes sense for their characters. Like the whole thing was that Cory's like, hey, I'm on probation. I need to be smarter. And then Shawn's like, hey, I've been around the block. I've seen some things. I need to be smarter. And then instead of them being like more clever with how they do it, they do something that you're watching them and you're just like, oh, so you guys are just breaking the law. You're just like it's vandalism. You're just breaking shit. And like, it just doesn't feel clever. It doesn't feel smart. It feels like as they're doing it, you're like, oh, you guys should be suspended. Like Curtis should sue you and you guys should like it should escalate the situation more than it did. And this was one of those like white privilege, I don't know what's going on moments where I'm just like, oh, they should go to jail. Like what's happening? They're adults. Like, arrest them. Like what's happening?
Yeah, well, the episode it like explains that's not just Curtis's office. Those aren't just his artifacts. That's the schools. Like there's so many things in there that aren't just Curtis's. And it's ridiculous that they would do all of this. And it's a childish prank. Like I'm with you. I want a ruse. I want a planning. I want there to be more thought put into this.
You know that there's a great moment where I think it's maybe, I don't remember the exact episode. I think it might be season 4 or 5. But Topanga and Cory are like fighting. They're having issues. And then Amy and Alan stage a fight. And right in front, it's season 5. It's that episode where Shawn, they get back together and Shawn doesn't know. They stage a fight right in front of Cory and Topanga and watch them get back together. And as they're going up, Amy looks down at Shawn and she winks. And you realize that this was all a ruse constructed by Shawn to master manipulate. That is clever. That is interesting. That's the kind of like brain power I want to see used in an episode like this.
Yeah, speaking of brain, when they go into the jar, and first of all, just the idea of it's the first human brain. I'm like, okay, now like we're caveman stupid. Like that's what. And actually, I apologize to cavemen out there, because if Geico has taught me anything, I don't want to stereotype. But they go in and they grab the brain, and it's also like clearly not a real brain. It's a prop. And again, it's a sitcom and all this other stuff, but it's like, don't blame me for critiquing the prop of the brain. Blame them for just being so stupid that we're supposed to believe this is a real brain or some kind of ancient brain, but also it can just break in half. Like, and like just in half. But
I mean,
the line,
go
do
ahead,
you
go ahead.
want personality or motor skills? Hilarious. I will give them that.
That's a great line. That's a great line. I just love that they have this conversation where Cory thinks that opening the jar to get the brain will get him laid somehow. Like, I love that that's the motivation. It just felt very Beavis and Butthead. This whole like,
Yes.
oh, dude, open the brain, we'll get laid. Yeah, you'll score. Yeah, let's open. It's just like, what is happening?
Again, like it. I don't. It was immature comedy, and I didn't enjoy it.
I loved the so there's a scene right after, like right in between the Curtis office scene, where we're in Feeney's class and Eric is interrupting him, and Eric's basically like, we all know that you love the dean, all that stuff. But what I really love about that is there's this really funny scene where he goes, you're in a triangle, Feeney, and he draws a square with his hands.
Yes.
Hilarious.
This is what I was talking about when I said Will is hilarious in this episode. And I was like, the ability to draw a square while saying triangle, and like, remember, I was like, that is comedic genius, but it's also just like, that's hard to do one thing with your body but say another thing. Like, it's it's so simple, but it's
I wonder
really
if it was in the script or if that was just Will.
I just like, again, from what I'm hearing, I can imagine it's Will, but like it's so brilliant, and it's a really funny bit. But if we're going to talk about the high of that scene, we got to talk about the low of that scene, which is right after Eric says to Feeney, I don't want you to wait like I waited because I had that happen to me. And then he screams Rachel in the way that is hilarious. But then the scene ends with him just crying. And I was like, no, it's played for laughs, but this is what we were talking about. This is that tragedy of a clown that the show has just like brought in from this.
Totally. Because what's happening that no one is really paying attention to is that the reason he's so invested into Feeney is because he's just trying to like fill this void. Like he's sleeping on his parents' couch still. Like he just lost Tommy. He is completely isolated and alone. And here's Feeney. He's like, oh, okay, well, Feeney will be my bud. I'll help Feeney. I'm gonna invest everything I can into this because this is where I can be of use. This kid is just trying to be of use, improve his worth, and show like who he is inside. He's just a kid who needs a hug. Like, I feel so bad for him.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, ultimately, I was like, there's so much going on in this scene that I feel like Eric is playing to, or Will is playing to. Like, I feel like he's thinking of like the arc that his character is going on.
Yeah.
Whether it's the editing, whether it's the storytelling, like no one else is really understanding the situation or the season arc that Eric has been in so far. So anyway, going back into the idiotic ruse. First of all, when they let out the bee, I was like, the bee is way more important than I understand, but I get that. And why is this bee in this jar with a brain? Again, like, it doesn't make sense. There's no real explanation for all of this. The throwing of the brain, and it's like covered in goo, and I didn't know what we were doing. The only
you could cut. Here's the thing. The brain is not relevant to the story at all. The amount of time we spend on them hot potatoing a brain back and forth, that's not even the discovery. It's not the thing. You can remove the brain from the whole episode and it wouldn't change a thing. What are we doing? Why is so much time being dedicated to this?
Absolutely. For me, what I wanted to talk about was when the gig is up and the dean comes in and Feeney comes in and they're like, Feeney did it. And nonsense. When they go, well, Feeney did it as an act of love. And she's like, is that true? And I'm like, no. You're not going to tell me that this woman thinks that an act of love in which you are so jealous, you destroy everything that my ex-husband has brought back from an expedition is romantic. I won't buy that.
I have to believe that she knew what was happening in the moment, and it was in that moment that she realized, wow, these kids really care about George, and she just went along with it. I have to believe that that's the case because no woman.
Even if you go along with it, what are you saying? Again, even if that's the case, what you're communicating by being like, oh no, if that was the case, it's fine. You are saying, I find moments of outrage quite sexy. Thank you, sir, for expressing
Sure.
your feelings in such a way where it's obvious enough that you would destroy property. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's like, and then also it kind of shows what they think a romantic gesture is.
Totally. Again, it's like it's one of those things where this was a classic example of the 90s showing us a red flag and painting it as green. And it's just
Yes.
like, oh, so this guy is capable of just going fucking berserk in his like 70s? No way, dude. What is happening? He's an educator. He doesn't need to be around kids. If this is what he's capable of, really?
If this is what you're capable of. Thank you. That's my point. That's I just wanted to do that. The actual romantic gesture, to be fair to the show, is when the bee is let out. Which again,
I'm sorry. Can we pause before the whole bee thing comes into play? Because I have to say this. The only way this show was able to make this storyline redeemable is in the last moment, it made Curtis into the biggest asshole they could. They had to make him someone who didn't care. Well, no, but it really came through at that last moment, because in the beginning, he's like, I want to win you back. I want to win you back. And then at the end, he's just like, dude, I don't care about any of that. All I care about is the bee. All I care about is the bee, to the point where her life almost becomes in jeopardy. And he doesn't even care about her. So I'm just saying that, like, they had to make him into such an ultra villain, because if a normal human being had been like, I've been working for this could save the lives of millions. You destroyed this, an adult, you're a 70-year-old man. You came in here and wrecked all my stuff for a woman. I'm like, that just doesn't compute for me. I can't make sense of that.
Well, again, it's ludicrous on so many levels, because a few things. One, what I was going to say is the bee, which is a bee that was let outside, has now flown back in just because. A bee, which has the entire world to explore, was like, actually, I'll go all the way back because they clearly need me.
Well, bees are attracted to the smell of brains. Everyone knows that.
So there's that. Then you have the fact that this man allows this rare bee to like just sit on it. Wouldn't he have some kind of technique of getting the bee overall?
Thank you. Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up, because this drove me crazy. He kept this bee in like a jar on the desk, and I'm like, if this is the discovery that you claim it to be, if this is the thing that's going to save the lives of millions, bruh, like, where are you storing this thing? When I watch like Planet of the Apes and they're working on these apes that can cure Alzheimer's, they have them locked up in the lab. They're like secure. There's scientists with just like gloves on. There's nothing. None of that is going on here. Absolutely. But this college doesn't have a science lab. Like, God, why you threw this bee in the storage closet? Like, what is happening?
This is what I'm talking about. This is why I said I want to see Pembroke's credentials. I don't believe it. Number one, they let Eric in. Number two, number two, this idea that they would just let this once in a lifetime, once in a generation find just be left in a closet unattended. It's crazy. And then this, again, I want to remind everyone, grown man, adventurer, smart enough to know that this is a rare bee, literally grabs the bee that Feeny slaps later and then goes, where's the anthropology department? For what? What do you expect them to do?
To resuscitate the bee?
What do you think? What do you think's going to happen from the slapped bee at this
reconstructive surgery? Obviously, like that's the only good. Like, it's so stupid.
Ludicrous.
It's so
ludicrous.
Stupid.
All ludicrous.
I love too that like he has this bee that's supposed to save the lives of millions, where you're just like, oh, so basically Cory and Shawn are responsible for millions of people dying. But again, you have to make him more of a villain. He doesn't care about saving the lives of millions of people. He cares about getting rich. He cares about that bag, baby. And as long as he cares about money, he's irredeemable, and it doesn't matter what wrong was done to this man.
But he doesn't even care about money because you brought one bee. One bee.
Yeah, you don't got more. You don't got a backup bee.
You don't got a backup bee. Just the one.
At least get a backup bee. Get a hive. Like, what are you doing?
We have to move on. We have to. Bee storyline. That's the non-bee storyline.
We just talked about the bee storyline.
I'm moving forward. Jack, we open up on Jack and Rachel making out again, and this idea of I watched it. I don't know about you. I watched it in this idea of Jack is still in mourning. Like
Yeah.
if you watch it with the idea of like Jack is still in mourning, Jack is still in denial, and like even why again, like Rachel's just like this is all we do. He's like, yeah, we should be doing more of it. Don't make me think. Let's just keep doing this. That's how I
Yes.
saw it. I mean,
100%. I
again,
read it the same way. It was so clear that like their relationship had just been this kind of physical, like this immediate, just like, oh, I just need to feel good right now kind of thing. But you can only do that for so long. And clearly Rachel's thinking like, all right, well, we've been making out nonstop for like 8 days. Do you want to go outside? Do you want to get some air? Do you want to like do something in public with me? Like it was so interesting that she was ready to be like, oh, we're going to have a relationship now. And Jack was just like, oh, we're going to have sex now. Like he thought that was the next step was sex. And she's like, no, I'm talking about like us actually being a relationship. I just thought that was interesting.
actually having conversations, actually going outside and being seen by other people.
Yeah.
But again, I want to say this storyline again feels very rushed because we get like what maybe 5 minutes of the storyline, if that. And I actually think there's something here about
Definitely
insecurities that you have when you are in a new relationship in general, but men being like the fact that later on when they're ready for their date, Jack comes out with platform shoes. I was like, number one, first and foremost, Rachel looks amazing. That dress,
absolutely.
oh my god,
She
oh
looked
my
great.
god.
And
Phenomenal.
honestly, I thought Matthew Lawrence pulled off the platform shoes. If I'm being honest, I thought he looked great
I
too.
mean, today that's fashion.
Yeah.
He looks good, and it all works. But like the idea of Rachel being like, oh, this is something I encounter all the time. Men think that I'm too tall. Great storyline. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Jack being like, actually, I wasn't even thinking that they would talk about you. I thought that they would talk about me. And
Yeah.
I'm actually insecure about my height, which by the way, I checked. Matthew Lawrence is 5'7". So I was like, why would he be insecure about this? I understand that for a lot of men under 5'10", it is a
Sure.
really
Yeah.
touchy subject. So I can see this being a worthwhile storyline. But it makes me think again, is it a worthwhile storyline because someone saw this and was like, hey, this is something that a couple would actually encounter? Or was it just another one of those things where the writers were like, that's funny. Let's write and make them feel insecure about that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I want to talk about this so much. I just want to quickly say this. We posted a picture the other day and someone asked that you do a height reveal. So can we just quickly just pause and can you tell people how tall you are? Because this keeps happening. If you notice on our Instagram, we have pictures and like Ceej kind of always towers over everyone. So as another beanpole, another tall person, how tall are you and how like insecure has this made you?
I am 6'4", so thank you for putting me on the spot.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And I'll say this. It I don't have as much insecurity about it because being taller is seen as an advantage. However, I will say that I do have insecurities about it, or I think about it even before we went and took photos recently. I was so mindful about what I was wearing because I was like, I'm gonna have to bend down and I need to make sure that like whatever I'm doing, I'm just like I look good and I'm not like exposing my body in a way that I don't want to,
Sure.
or like anything else. Because yeah, it's commonplace. But it's also funny because it's only in photos that I remember how tall I am compared to everyone
Totally.
else. On any other time, like day to day, it's like I would say that I'm eye to eye with someone who's Jack's height. Because
Totally.
to me, like I'm so used to looking down that I'm like, oh yeah, as long as we're making eye contact, we are eye to eye. But when I look at a photo, I'm like, God damn it, I'm tall.
So this is very interesting. You're very tall. I am shorter. I am 5'8". Like I am closer to Matthew Lawrence's height. And I have to say that you're right. The way that like short kings are treated, and it's very interesting because it's the one thing that people feel comfortable kind of openly like making a statement about. Like girls will be like, especially like on dating apps, they'll like no one under 6 feet, like all that stuff. So there is this almost this thing of just like this perception that men are supposed to be tall, but it feels like that same, like it comes from that same mindset of like, oh, a woman is supposed to be very thin and have a skinny waist. And it just feels like we've matured past that for women. And it doesn't feel like the expectations for men's physicality have really matured past those preconceived ideas of what a man should be. And I just think that's really interesting.
Because in the Sex Lives of College Girls, the HBO series, there's a whole episode dedicated to short kings. It's like,
I haven't seen
a short king. Yeah.
Well, because... yeah, that concept of a short king is something that now in like 2023 is like a conversation that's happening. But I can tell you that like prior to 2015, there was no short king talk. But I just thought it was interesting. And especially when you're with a woman, our partner, in any case, well, yeah, I'll say woman because it is kind of a gendered thing. You know, when I've been with women who have worn high heels of a certain height, you do kind of feel like, oh, I'm going to stand a little bit taller. I'm going to wear shoes that make me feel a little bit taller. You just want to feel like you can be eye to eye. And so I understood where Jack was coming from because there is such a public perception of it.
I agree, but I'll say this. First of all, I think it is notable that the people who say something are all older women, and i.e. they are outdated ways of thinking. This was it was interesting. This is a very 60 plus heavy episode.
Sure.
That we don't get very often. But again, with Feeny, the old ladies, their way of thinking is outdated. There's nothing wrong with Jack being shorter than Rachel. And I think I just wanted to point that out. That's what I'm gonna call out.
Totally.
And I think that's the lesson.
Well, I also think that this excuse of, you know, not wanting to be seen because of height might be something that's true to Jack's insecurities, but I also think it's this hyperfixation on this relationship and all of the different elements of it. He's overthinking so he doesn't have to face what's really bothering him or the like be in that silence of what's really, you know, going on inside. So
I completely agree. Let's kind of wrap this up so we can get to
sure.
All right, bro moment. What bro moment do you have?
Okay, so my bruh moment is the boys committing vandalism. And the idea that would be a romantic gesture to destroy, you know,
thank you. The romantic gesture part of it. I mean, absolutely the destroying of ancient artifacts is right up there. But also this idea that it would be a romantic gesture to do so. That's my moment. What is the Feeny lesson?
Nothing gets a woman hornier than a brain, bro. Nothing. A slippery brain. Whew. I don't know what to walk away with from this episode. I don't know what the lesson is supposed to be. You tell me. What's your Feeny lesson?
You know, I was so fixated on asking yours. I can't even pretend like I have a Feeny lesson for this episode.
Eric says at one point, he who hesitates is lost, or he who hesitates loses. So I think that's what we're supposed to walk away with. But the real thing of it is that if you want the best for someone, you should commit crimes and blame it on them.
Well, like it's interesting because usually we're able to like tie a thread together, like with the A storyline and the B storyline, or the non-B storyline, and it was chaotic. I don't know the
well, I think that the overarching theme, which is pointed to us by the title, is that, you know, Jack just needs to be true to himself and
be true. You know what? It took some talking. We got there. Be true to you. That is the Feeny lesson. That is not the Feeny lesson that we get, but that is the Feeny lesson that kind of ties it all together. Okay, what grade are you giving this?
I'm giving this episode a D+.
I was gonna give it a C. I'm not gonna lie, I'm being very generous, but I just was like, when I thought about it, I was like, I'll give it a C. And
this episode
do not fault you for your D+, not one bit.
It's entertaining enough, but it's just the idea that this episode just didn't need to have, like, you can skip this episode and nothing really will change. I thought the Dean and Feeny were dating, so I didn't know that there was this pressure for him to make a move until this episode came. Like, if he were to propose to her in the next episode, it'd be like, yeah, sure, you guys have been dating for a while, right? I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Like, again, it just felt so rushed. it felt like, I don't know. I felt like, again, when it first started, I was like, oh, this is a problem. We have some tension. Feeney's waiting too long. I feel like the show waited too long to bring it up.
Yeah.
And again, had we just gotten a scene in the beginning, or again, if let's do some editing and just move the conversation with Angela and Topanga earlier, and then have Eric talking to Feeney, yeah, it makes so much more sense.
No, most of the time we sit here and we're like, oh, if the show had just done this, it would have made sense. If it had just done this, it would have made sense. This episode is kind of pointless, and that's the only reason. Yeah, just like make it more relevant. I think it's not even about a sense thing. It's just like, make us care about this by making the focus Curtis and this bee and this brain. We see no development happening between the Dean and Feeney, and I would have much rather have just seen them go on a date and have like it just be this conversation where Feeney feels like he has to act a certain way and she kind of like settles to them, and we just see them have chemistry together. I would have much rather preferred that than this whole brain hot potato thing that happened.
You're right. They kind of take a shortcut by making it Feeney anyway, because the audience cares about Feeney.
Yeah.
You are happy with like the happy ending that he gets, like when she kisses his hand a little bit later, and it's like, oh, this is sweet, but it's like, it's not really sweet because you earned it. It's sweet because we love Bill Daniels, and seeing him be happy makes us happy.
It's like watching your grandpa get married again. You're just like, oh, like it's just that's all it is. Like the actual romance of their story, I've yet to see. So
that's a really good point. Like, again, and also it's a little bit of a, I don't know what you have in common other than you're old. That's it.
Not wanting to die alone is enough of a reason to get together, I guess. Oh, that's really dark. They love each other. They love each other, I'm sure. We just don't know why.
Well, that's the episode. Let's move on. Now we're going to move on to our interview again with a super fan of Girl Meets World and Boy Meets World. She is a social worker who does cosplay and listens, and she's going to talk to us about last week's episode. So everyone, welcome Sailor Ignite, aka Amber.
Yay, hey!
Hi! We're so happy to have you on.
I am so excited. I heard that y'all were talking about social work things, and I was just like firing up my mind, and I was like, ooh, I'm gonna have to tell them the things I know.
Please. Absolutely. Yes. You know, this storyline between Tommy and Eric is one that I think a lot of fans have really kind of sentimental memories towards, but as we were watching it, we really kind of saw that there were things about their dynamic that we were like, is this healthy for Tommy? Is this healthy for Eric? So to have you kind of on here to kind of help us shed light on like what about this relationship we should kind of take away with, it would be helpful for us, I think.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of difference between like what is best practice and what might have actually happened, and then also just like TV drama.
Sure, absolutely. Sure. Really quickly, Amber, tell us, what's your history with Boy Meets World?
I watched it when it was in syndication, mainly on the Disney Channel. I'm 27, so I wasn't really like, I wasn't really watching it when it was airing. But then when I got older, I think maybe I was in middle school, every morning when I woke up, ABC was playing at least 2 episodes, and they were playing them in order. So I got to watch most of it. I think that pretty much the only season I don't really have like solid memories of is season 3, but I'm watching it now. But yeah, every morning it was Boy Meets World.
I love how you accidentally but also intentionally called us old.
Yeah.
My bad.
When you were it's fine. I watched it when it was live, and then when you were watching it, I think you said in middle school, I was like in New York doing the same thing every morning at my first job. But you know, different strokes for different folks. The fact is that you got here. When you first saw it, like, how did you feel about this episode when you first saw it?
Yeah, when I first saw it, obviously it was before I started social work stuff, but I thought it was like really cute that Eric had built this like brother relationship with Tommy. I thought it would be really good for Tommy to have somebody, because a lot of times, you know, when you're in foster care, you don't really have like an adult role model aside from like the workers, and you don't really have somebody who's consistent. So I thought it was really cute. But obviously watching it now as an adult, I'm like, we need some boundaries here.
So this is interesting because, so you work in social work. How often do these like big brother type of relationships happen? And is there any like best practices in a relationship like this?
Yeah, so essentially, I used to work in Tennessee. We call it DCS, Department of Children's Services. And when I got my undergrad, that's what I was like studying specifically in social work for, to become a social worker for that department. And so when I actually started, I was actually in Child Protective Services, but we still work adjacent with foster care. And now currently a lot of those like independent relationships would not really be happening in foster care, and that's more just because of like, we know that these are children who are at risk and a lot of harm can come to them, so them just hanging out with this adult alone is not something that would be the safest thing for them. um, but as far as them building like relationships and connections, they'll if they're in a group home or an orphanage, kind of like what Tommy is, they'll be building relationships with those kids who are there. It seemed like Tommy's was one that catered more to littler kids. So if he was one of the older ones, then he'd be one of like those older kids who's kind of mentoring and helping out with those younger kids, and that's usually what the relationship is. But even with that, there's just, you're coming in with a lot of kids with a lot of like different traumas and a lot of different stories, and sometimes kids may be offending on one another. Sometimes they call it telling their story on somebody instead of calling children offenders sometimes. So they'll be telling their stories on other kids, and there are like certain protocols that have to be in place to make sure that these kids are not hurting each other. So there's not always a lot of like alone time now. Before the 90s, who knows what was going on. In Tennessee, there was a huge lawsuit called Brian A. It's the Brian A. lawsuit, Brian A. versus Haslam, and it started in like the year 2000. And there was a little kid who wasn't, I think he was 9 years old in Memphis, who wasn't receiving any mental health care. He wasn't going to school, just wasn't getting the necessary things to succeed in life for an extended amount of time because he didn't have a caregiver and he didn't have like a permanent housing situation. So when that lawsuit happened, Tennessee specifically had to revamp their foster care system. And one of those things that they made sure was that if children are being placed out of the home, that they look for family placements first, and that also they try to keep them, if they can't do family placements, then they try to keep them like in at least that same community, so they wouldn't be taking a kid all the way from Tennessee all the way across the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there are also like other things that go along with that, like making sure that case managers have lower caseloads, so that they can actually have time to fully investigate what's going on with these kids and make sure that they are actually safe, and make sure these foster homes are safe placements, increasing the number of foster homes that are available so that kids are not sitting around in like office buildings or things for a long time. And is it better now than it was in the 90s? Yes. Is it perfect? No.
Perfectly said. I want to ask, what made you interested in social work? Like, how did you get involved in general?
Yeah, so my grandma was actually like really was an advocate and was like really involved in her community. She sued HUD and they like had to settle that case out of court. She worked with Planned Parenthood. She made sure that bus routes came into her neighborhood. She was really like
Okay.
she had a street dedication to herself. She they called her the champion for the poor and things like that. So part of it is like genetics, but also like my mom really instilled that in me. She was one of the people, I'm from Memphis, so like a lot of civil rights things were going on when she was growing up, and those morals are really instilled in me of like making sure that you're involved, making sure you're helping people, making sure that we're doing the best for the most people as possible. So I saw social work as a way that, while it's not a perfect system, that it was at least a way for me to get involved and help people and support people, and not necessarily give a voice to people who are, there's not like people always have voices, but more to just give people the resources that they need to best support themselves.
Sure.
America does not deserve Black women. It just really doesn't. like here, your grandma is involved in like helping everybody out. You over here being a social worker because you love it. And I'm just like, this country don't deserve y'all.
Ain't it the truth? Hey, okay, so I'm curious, if I or any one of our listeners were like, hey, I'm really touched by the Tommy storyline. Like, I want to, contribute in a way that would actually be healthy. Is there an avenue that people can take to assist with children like Tommy without it crossing boundaries or getting into an unhealthy place?
Yeah, so one way is Big Brothers Big Sisters. They are really good about making sure that there are healthy matches between adults and children. And specifically the one in Tennessee, in Middle Tennessee, has a bunch of different programs. So you can do online if you can't commit to like meeting with a kid in person, but they also have some spaces that are specific for LGBTQ youth. They have spaces where if you can only commit to doing it during the school year, you can go to the school and visit the littles. So Boys and Girls Club is definitely one that I think of. You can also volunteer at what are they called? I don't want to call them correctional facilities, but they're like residential homes for children who are in the foster care system. You can volunteer at places like that, and that's a way to build relationships with them. The Boys and Girls Club, those across America, there are going to be a lot of children who may not necessarily always be in foster care, but they also may be at risk or living in poverty, and being able to get involved with children in healthy ways that way. They're always, and there's almost always, if you look up volunteer opportunities with children, there's almost always something that you can be a part of, whether it's something that a local nonprofit is doing, whether it's something that schools may be doing in your area. There's always ways to get involved. The things that you want to look for is making sure that whenever you're talking to people about what the boundaries are, is that you're never going to be alone with a child. There's always going to be more than one adult around. They make sure that their parents are involved in this in some sort of way, that the children have like some sort of autonomy over this relationship and things like that. So those are just important key things to look out for.
Again, that's fantastic. And we love this work. You brought up so many things that they're doing now. We'll say doing now because we don't know what they were doing in the 90s.
Yeah.
That we were just like begging for someone to do in Tommy's case.
Yeah.
Because like for us, when you look at the episode, I think one of our biggest questions was like, what does an experience like Tommy's like just them being that close and having that much interaction, like what does that do for like even a child in that situation, if you could see it?
So the relationship itself is not unhealthy because Eric is not inherently a bad person. He's not a dangerous person, and not necessarily, and building that relationship and having that stability for a kid who may not have had that previously is a good thing. The dangerous thing about it is that there was no like boundary set of like, I cannot adopt you, or this is what our relationship is. And that one thing they teach us in social work school and a lot of like counseling professions and things like that is that you always have to talk about termination, that this may eventually end. And Eric never talked about that, and nobody ever talked about it, because even if he did get adopted, there's no for sure, even if he got adopted in Philadelphia, there's no sure way of knowing that that family would have been okay with Eric being around Tommy still. So just saying like, hey, I am around now, I want to support you as best I can, but you may be getting adopted, or some other family may be around you, and I just won't be around. Or even if Eric's getting close to graduating college soon, he might even get a job somewhere and go somewhere else. So I think it's just not being as honest and transparent with them about what this relationship is. Like, hey, I'm your brother. I'm not a potential dad. I would like to like care about you and mentor you as you grow up, but that is the extent of this relationship. And yes, he is young and he may not fully understand that, but at least somebody would have been preparing him for potentially this relationship ending.
Sure. So Amber, so you wouldn't recommend telling an adoption agent in front of a orphan, I want to adopt this kid, letting him get excited, and then telling him, I'm not going to adopt you? You don't think that's a healthy way to go about that?
No, because, and to be transparent about it, white children are expensive to adopt.
Like, oh, this is
we going there. I was ready.
Okay, let's talk about that. Why are they so pricey?
Why are they so pricey? Because racism. But yes, like, so just thinking of all the paperwork and things that go into adoption, there's a lot of trainings you have to do. There's a home study that you have to do, which Eric obviously would not have passed because he did not have his own home.
Yeah. Sleeping on the couch.
Exactly. And there is like, you have to be able to afford like, you know, the basic needs for them, like clothing, food. You have to live within, show that you know what schools they're going to go to and be ready for their education plan. You have to have insurance, health insurance for them. You have to have, like, now if you do a home study, you have to have a fire extinguisher in your house, so you have to pay for that. Make sure your whole like system, your CO2 monitor, your smoke detector, all of those things are up to date. That's money that you have to spend to be able to even just be clear to like possibly adopt a kid.
Can millennials even adopt at this point? I mean, you said housing, you
Yeah,
said
you said a lot of expensive
food.
things like health insurance and
Yeah.
food and things that I can't afford that.
Yeah, no, like it's a really, even when it's another family member adopting a child, like a child that's
Really?
their own
Wow.
family, there's a whole list of things that a case manager has to get to like go through. I remember talking to families, just asking them so many questions that felt really intrusive, like how much is your phone plan every month? How much do you make every month? How much do you pay for like groceries every month? Like how much gas do you think you spent? Like these really in-depth questions that sometimes people can't answer and are kind of like just really being vulnerable with people, that it's a lot that goes into making sure that you can afford to take care of this child.
Especially if they're white, apparently, because it's more
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, so he definitely would not have been able to do that. And unfortunately, that is a sometimes not everyone who adopts Black and brown children is doing it because it's cheaper, but sometimes it is a cheaper option because they are not as
Wow.
wanted.
This is just
You gotta love it. Gotta love everything that this brings up. I was gonna say,
2023, and we're still getting devalued, guys.
Yeah.
We got to do better.
I was gonna ask, what is the significance of a storyline like this?
So I think that it is kind of interesting to see. I think it's something good to at least be aware of, because I just think of the trauma of Tommy if he went to California and turned out this family was not a good match. Like either he's either getting shipped back to Philadelphia, or he's gonna have to start all over in a new foster care system that nobody really knows him or knows anything about him. So there's trauma there. And I think it's helpful for people to really see that, to know what's going on with these kids, seeing how much they really crave to like make human connections, to have stability, to have someone there in their lives. I think it's really good to see that. I think some things that may not necessarily be realistic, depending on what Tommy's background story is that he didn't really have a lot of behavior issues, or have any like outbursts or anything, which is kind of unusual. Because even that interaction with Eric where he just kind of pouts, I guess that's his thing. But a lot of times we see more, well, not a lot of times, but depending on the kid, they can have a little more of excited type, it's more explosive, like little emotions and reactions to things like that. And that's not unusual, especially to a child that's been through a traumatic experience.
I was gonna
So I
say, I
think
would
it's always,
imagine
yeah,
an
so it's always,
anxious attachment theory.
yeah, so it's always good to show the foster care in like some sort of light that is not positive, because that's not, a lot of people don't have positive experiences. We still have, even now, we have a lot of children who come out, who are aging out of the foster care system, who when they come out, they are still at high risk of being trafficked. They are still at high risk of experiencing poverty, high risk of mental health illnesses, of suicide and things like that. They don't always have great outcomes. So if we like show it as this beautiful magical system where every child gets adopted and every child gets loved, that's not realistic, and that doesn't help the people who are being harmed in the system.
Sure, definitely. Amber, I wanted to ask, I know you said that things are a little bit different now, but throughout your years and your work, were you able to build a personal relationship with a kid that meant a lot to you, or have you purposefully tried to kind of create those walls so that you don't have to break hearts?
Yeah, so I by accident, like I said, I worked in child protective services, so my cases were not as long term with kids. For the most part, I only had my cases for about 90 days. And there was one time where I kept getting one family over and over, and I didn't really express to the child like, "Hey, I am just here to make sure that you are safe, and then eventually we will like end this relationship." So I had seen her maybe through about 2 grades, so, and she was getting ready to move to another school, so she was already kind of like scared of like going to this new school and anything. And she was like, "Are you going to be in my new school with me?" And I was like, "Oh no." I'm not, but that's a good thing because it means that you're safe. And it was really upsetting. And her mom called me later on to like help further explain it of like, listen, baby, like if this lady comes in because when people are concerned about your safety and they want to make sure that you are safe. So if you don't see her anymore, then that means that people think that we're safe and that you're happy. So I usually try to keep like pretty clear boundaries with my kids and just be like, hey, I'm here until like I know that you are safe. If you are not safe, then I might have to come around a little bit more. But that was one where I kind of messed up and she was just so little and cute that I like did not really work on termination with her.
Well,
wow. Honestly, I'm gonna say right off the bat, this has been so helpful and so informative, and I appreciate you taking the time because there's just such a depth to the conversation that we knew there had to be.
Yeah.
We were like, it's got to be deeper than this. But like everything that you brought up is amazing. Before we kind of wrap this up, I do want to ask a little bit about you. You've been doing cosplay, and like again, like how did you get into that? Like, tell us some more things about you.
Yeah, so I am always the extra friend. Like if somebody's like, "Oh, we're gonna dress up," I'm like, "Okay, so are we gonna have a theme? Like, what are we doing here? Like, are we dressing up like Met Gala dress up, or are we dressing up like cute brunch dressing up?" So I just always like doing costumes. I kind of started in college where there's like my first Halloween where I didn't have my mom around to buy me a costume.
Yeah.
So I just had some clothes that I put together and I had like a yellow ascot and somehow I found like some Mickey ears and I was like, okay, I'm gonna be Mickey Mouse this year. And just put that outfit together. So I started that kind of closet cosplay. And then I've always been like this nerd person. Like today is superhero day, so I have on my Batman shirt.
Hey.
Yes. So I've always been a nerd. I took a comic book class in college and that really got me restarted into like reading comic books. So from there, it's more just like, how can I make the clothes that I have work to be these characters? Or how can I do my makeup to look like these characters? And I've always really had fun with it. And I also found out that my grandma, not my other grandma, not the
I was gonna say this woman had time for everything.
Both of them actually were pretty creative. Like like the one who was the champion for the poor, she like used to be like the one who makes like really cool lunches and stuff. But anyway, my other grandma, she would sew. And so I was like, well, maybe I can learn how to sew. And so I've started learning how to sew so I can make my own cosplays now. So it feels really good. But basically I'm just a huge nerd and I want to dress up.
It takes so much creativity and so much just like I don't know, it's just so fun to just kind of put on a new costume and be something else. I wanted to know, like, do you find that this space is more welcoming to people of color now? Like, I guess I've always like saw the Comic-Con scene and it always seems very white to me. It always seemed like a very white space. So I just wanted to know from your experience, does it seem like there's change happening there?
It's still a very white space. I think that I know that there is change happening. I went to one of the huge cons. It's called Dragon Con. It takes place in Atlanta. It's 5 days, 24-hour programming. And there was, I had gone with a group called Blurred Over, and they specifically work with Black nerds. And it was just a group of Black folks in costumes walking around. And this older guy came up to us and he was like, I remember when Dragon Con first started, there was like maybe 5 Black people out here. And now I just get to see a whole bunch of young nerds out here, young Black nerds out here. And it just really warms my heart. So I think that there is a shift happening. I think it's also just with TikTok and the internet, it's just so much easier to find other Black nerds. It used to be where you couldn't find anybody. Maybe you mentioned it at school that you watch anime or that you like comic books. Maybe you get bullied a little bit for it and then you don't find your people. So I think it's just easier to find people. The space is still kind of racist. Well, not kind of, it's still racist.
Hey, call it what it is.
Call it what it is.
It wasn't yours.
I mean, they're not gonna fight me.
Like Sailor Moon wasn't Black. I get so mad.
Yeah, there's still racism in the scene. There's still people who are like, well, this character isn't Black, or you can't cosplay this character because they're not Black, or whatever other dumb thing. But I think that it's just so much easier to find other Black people and other Black and brown people and other people of color in this space that are willing to support you and encourage you and even like teach you tips and tricks on how to like make cosplay affordable for yourself.
Wow, that's so cool.
Just look at them and be like, is Jesus still white in your church? If so, Quiet.
Don't talk to me.
Blue-eyed devil.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us? Any kind of homework you want to give our listeners? Anything you want to plug?
Or a place where they can find you and follow your cosplay journey.
Yeah, so I am Sailor Ignite, Sailor as in Sailor Moon, Ignite as in, starting that fire in your life. Yeah. So on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, if anybody still is using that. So you can find me there. My homework assignment is a little related to adoption. It's anime that's really, really cute. It's called Spy Family. It's Spy X Family, depending on who you talk to. The premise of it, without giving away too much, is that there's this spy who adopts this little girl. He doesn't know that she's a telepath, so she's like reading his mind. And then he has to make this fake family. So he marries this woman. Turns out she's an assassin. He doesn't know that either. And it's such a great story and all their shenanigans. Very highly recommended. It's very funny, but it's also a lot of action in it. It's a great balance for anybody who's like needing a starter anime or something that's a little like easy and not too like tugging at the heartstrings too hard.
I'm down. I mean, it sounds like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith, True Lies, and then also a little bit of X-Men thrown in there. I'm loving this.
Yeah, we've had this conversation a bunch that we always feel like, well, horror is really the only thing that's willing to be risky and tell original stories, but anime is right there. A huge library full of original stories there that are right for exploring. So,
yeah, definitely.
Again, thank you so much, Amber, for joining us. I truly appreciated this time. I appreciated you reaching out. It's been so phenomenal.
So great meeting you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Like, you're the coolest. We're so happy to have you on.
Oh my gosh, don't say that. Don't hype me up too much. Thank you.
No, we hype. We
hype you up, especially for what you do. Like, we always tell people to dream, try, and do good. You out there dreaming, trying, and doing good.
You doing all three.
Yeah.
It's across the board.
Y'all, I literally was like, I was looking for like a Boy Meets World podcast, and I was like, I specifically need Black people who are talking about this show, and that's how I found y'all. So I am so grateful for this. Thank y'all so much for all y'all do. I'm like over here always cheering for y'all.
Thank you so much.
So great to hear.
What a cool person. Like, that was so awesome to have her on and just give us that perspective on this episode that we knew had more meat on the bones. She was able to give us insight that we didn't really have and just put things into context in a way that really made the story, I think, more rich.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just super grateful for her jumping on.
Yes. All right. So moving on, Amber gave us her homework. See, what is your homework for the week?
It's really hard for me to talk about homework without talking about what happened this week.
Yeah, you will have to wait.
My homework is going to be letting you do your homework request first, because I have not.
Okay. I've looked, and I do not think I've brought this up yet, but have we spoken about jury duty?
No, we haven't, but I've seen ads for it everywhere.
I'm so excited. I can't, let me just tell you. So, Jury Duty, for those of you who don't know, is a show that's on Amazon by way of this app called Freevee. It's a Freevee show. Amazon's playing it. You'll figure it out. Anyway, the whole premise is this guy goes to what he thinks is jury duty, and he's doing like the life in a real trial. Unknowns to him is everything, every single person involved, like be it the bailiff, the judge, character witnesses, people walking down the hall, they are all actors. It is very much the Truman Show. It is very much
is it Truman Show? Is it more like Murderville, that show on Netflix, where like everyone's in on the joke except for one person?
It sounds like that. I have no idea, but like it is very much everyone's in on it. But again, this isn't like a second or an afternoon. This goes on for weeks. I think like at the end of it was like 19 days.
That's like manipulation. That's not a joke anymore.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's not like a prank. This is like just a full season's worth of comedy.
That's enough time to form a trauma.
That's what I want to talk about it because it's hilarious. And it is really interesting when you see, like, basically they took the formats of a mockumentary. So it's like The Office is how the whole show is shot, but like it always begins and ends with like you understanding that there's only one person who doesn't know that everything else is scripted.
Yeah.
And it's like great improv because you're like, they have to take his responses and kind of react to it, but also you could totally tell they're like pushing him towards certain things to get him to respond, and they just really lucked out with this guy. This is an experiment that totally could have went wrong in so many turns, and each and every time this guy, the guy that they chose, just always chooses kindness, always chooses understanding. He's like one of, and it's like one of those tested real guys, like, you know, like nice guys. There's like
Sure,
people
yeah.
who, like, say they'll do the right thing. This guy was literally faced, unbeknownst to him, with like moral dilemma after moral dilemma, and each and every time he just like made the right choice. And it's a great fun show to watch if you like The Office, but it's also like just a heartwarming show. It's like a real life Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool. Well, you know what? I not, this isn't my homework, but speaking of real life Ted Lasso, I don't know if you saw, you know, I recommended Welcome to Wrexham for homework a little while ago, and they like advanced their season, and like a whole storybook romance of, you know, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney coming into this losing. It's like a real life Ted Lasso in like a really interesting way. So
absolutely, yeah, no, I noticed that.
You know, for homework, I'm gonna recommend the Brotherly Love podcast. Actually, we talked about that at the front half of the show. I really love what they're doing. Like, don't get me wrong, Joey Lawrence is kind of like a cheesy dad. He's so corny in so many ways.
He can cheese like, all over me. Like, honestly,
yeah. Oh, okay,
to this day, Joey Lawrence. The other day, someone in our messages sent me a photo of all three of them, and they were just like, can we just talk about the Lawrence brothers? And I was like, I can talk to you about the Lawrence brothers all day. And Joey, from day one, always.
Joey Lawrence released a rap album in like 1992, and it's one of my favorite things of all time. You can watch the music videos. Actually, that's my homework. Go on YouTube and watch the Nothing My Love Can't Fix music video from Joey Lawrence. It's phenomenal. It's so 90s. It's so ridiculous. It's my favorite thing.
Okay. I want to say love does have its limits. Let me just make that clear. But yeah, we'll listen to some Joey Lawrence. Again, if you just want to look at his photos, because that boy has made it a mission to just keep us.
Isn't it interesting how like so many TV stars just get, you know, these maybe just celebrities in general, but like I think about Joey Lawrence, I think about like John Stamos, I think about these people who are just like were handsome and just stayed handsome, like Rob Lowe just like got better looking somehow. Like I don't know what's going on with, like, Paul Rudd hasn't aged a day, like, you know, Blair Underwood still looks like Blair Underwood. Like there's just so many like
you're right. And here's the thing, I want to make it very clear. Even if you don't, like, I will say that you are not required as a celebrity to maintain that. And I think there's something freeing about like being able to. But when you do, and you're like, again, a nice person on top of it, it's just like, man, life really was just like, here's a really good hand. Also, you know how Joey Lawrence started off, not there as much anymore, but the hair, it's the hair casting, Joey Lawrence.
Oh, you're most famous head of hair. I would say, yeah, exactly. I feel like the hair is the thing that got him famous. I mean,
you ain't lying. So,
you know, here's a true story. If you listen to his record, one of the songs on his album features his hair.
What? Okay.
No,
okay.
I made that up.
I would not be surprised. ASMR is a thing. All right. Thanks you guys so much for listening to Bromance World. Don't forget to leave us a rating and review your favorite podcast. Listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Keep up with us at Bromance World in all the places. Please check out Sailor Ignite, Amber at Sailor Ignite, at both Instagram and TikTok.
And help us get to our subscription goal for YouTube. Please follow our YouTube page and help us get to thousands. What's our goal?
1,000.
1,000.
Like, how
We
are
can do it,
you
guys.
supposed to help people get there if
Yeah,
you don't know?
we
what
can do it. 1,000 of you. That's all it takes. Let's do it.
Absolutely. You know what? Just go hit subscribe, and then you ain't even gotta check it out again if you don't want to. But if you do want to, again, we'll be serving you face, we'll be serving you hair, and we'll be watching you guys dream.
We'll also be watching them try
and doing good.
Do some good, y'all. Do some damn good.
All right, later, Ruz.
Later, Ruz.
I do not blame you if you ended early. I really don't.
When this boy meets world.